intent on the TARDIS's controls, had his back to the door when it opened.
"Hello,"
he said cheerily, without looking round.
"Don't forget to close it behind you. It's a terrible draught all of a sudden."
He heard a confirmatory click as his visitor obeyed the injunction.
Mind you, there was a bit of a draught when we last met. Snowstorms are like that, aren't they? Bit beautiful, bit chilly. Had another bit of a problem with snow, actually. But I suppose you know that already. Don't mind me. I'm just tweaking a few things.
He raced round to the other side of the console, fiddled with a couple of controls, and finally looked up to meet Dasterium's eyes. She smiled. "I think you could definitely say the Great Intelligence constituted a problem with snow. Hello, Doctor." She began to stroll casually around the console, surveying the control room. "I see you've redecorated." Instantly, the Doctor lifted a warning forefinger.
Be very, very careful about what you say next.
She halted on the opposite side of the console, her eyes luminous with amusement. "I wasn't going to say another word. I was going to leave you wondering."
Okay, fair enough. After all, that is what you do.
He threw his hands wide, then brought them together with a smack, and rubbed them together enthusiastically.
Well, what should we talk about instead? Been doing anything interesting lately?
You could say that. I've just been visiting Gallifrey. The Doctor froze into utter stillness for a few moments. Then he ducked his head and focused almost ferociously on the console again. His hands were suddenly terribly active, but his mouth was shut like a trap. Perhaps I should explain that it wasn't Gallifrey as it is now. This was another day, a very important day, a very long time ago. The Doctor kept his eyes on the console and modulated his tone to politely interested as he manipulated the controls.
Oh yes, and which day was that?
I had to meet someone there, a girl. She was there to tell you something important. I was there to make sure she did so with absolute accuracy. The Doctor looked up, then straightened up.
And what was she there to tell me?
His eyes were unreadable. Dasterium gave him an old-fashioned look. Oh, come now, Doctor. I know perfectly well you know what it was, because we discussed it the first time we met. It was the day you borrowed the TARDIS. At least, that's what you told yourself at the time was happening. But you know better now, don't you? It turned out to be a moot point both about the definition of the word borrowed and exactly who was borrowing whom, didn't it?
Well, you should know.
Dasterium studied him, a smile spreading across her face. Ah, you've worked out who I am at last. The Doctor shrugged, with a hint of irritation at his own obtuseness.
Can't think why it took so long. The clue was always there in your name, wasn't it? Can't work out why it took me until now to notice the anagram.
I dare say the rather heavy-duty hint I gave you last time helped as well. I'm always there when you need me, Doctor. You know that. You remember, don't you? I'll always be here, but this is when we talked. And that would have been the only time in this universe, had events in others not dictated otherwise. Do you remember what I said about the next time we talked, you and me? That it wouldn't be exactly the same you, and it wouldn't be exactly the same me? Not entirely true, because even when you become a different you, in so many ways, you're exactly the same. But, as you've deduced, I am a different me from your me. Still, we are talking.
Every time you visited, you always checked in with the TARDIS, my TARDIS. I used to wonder why you made such a point of touching them. But that's something else I've worked out. You were talking to yourself, weren't you?
Just as you've often talked to yourself. The principle isn't dissimilar. Physical contact facilitated communication, and I had to communicate with myself, despite the potential dangers of the resultant temporal anomalies. As noted previously, I'm breaking any number of rules just by being here. But breaking rules has never stopped you, has it? Not when the need is great enough. And it's never stopped my Doctor either. Which is how and why I come to be here.
What I haven't worked out is why you're here on your own. The rules can be broken for one, why not for two? Why couldn't you both come through the breach?
There are reasons, Doctor. One day you'll know what they are. Here and now, you need only know that I had to come alone. And I couldn't come in my own form. My physical structure is still in my own universe. This form, you see, Dasteriam, this is the only form with which my matrix could enter and exist in this universe. You don't yet appreciate, though one day you will, how vital it was that you chose my exact counterpart, not some other TARDIS, or even this way wouldn't have succeeded. That's why my doctor was very insistent that it wasn't left to chance.
And you knew you'd been successful in making sure of that by the very fact that you were able to come at all. So you came through to make sure Clara told me to take the right TARDIS, your equivalent self, thereby ensuring that you could come through in the first place in order to tell her. Congratulations, you're probably very pleased with yourself. And since then you've been checking up on me and fracturing the breach more severely every time you bob back and forth between universes.
Dasteriam shook her head.
No, Doctor, that wasn't necessary. Once was sufficient. You really should have worked that out yourself. I am a TARDIS, after all. Once in this universe, I could travel through time and space in exactly the same way I do on my own. It was necessary for me to come through only once in order to keep all the 14 appointments I needed to keep.
The doctor looked up sharply.
14? I make it only 13. Clara and 12 of me.
Once again, Dasteriam shook her head.
14? I have one last visit to make. Then I must return to my own universe, and my own doctor.
Well, you better hurry up. Only 12 regenerations in a cycle, 3 more lives in a cat. But this is still my last one, so you better not leave it too late.
I won't.
One corner of her mouth was beginning to curve upward.
Don't.
Don't what?
Don't smile like that. As if you know something I don't. River smiles at me like that all the time.
Well, she usually does know something you don't. Fear not, Doctor. We will see each other again, I promise you. That's when I'll explain why this has all been happening. In fact, why everything that's ever happened to you has happened.
She stepped close to the console and reached up, laying her palm flat against the time rotor. Her eyes closed, and she stood motionless for several seconds. The doctor watched her with a slight degree of irritation. He had a sudden feeling of being left out, and he didn't much care for it. Eventually he commented, with a tinge of jealousy,
"I don't mind me. Talk among yourselves, why don't you?"
Dasteriam opened her eyes and smiled mischievously, first at the time rotor, then at him.
Oh, but we were. We were talking about you.
The doctor visibly decided not to pursue that line of conversation.
Right, story so far.
He said energetically, abruptly changing the subject. He began to pace back and forth, enumerating each point on his fingers as he spoke.
There's a thing, a bad thing, and a big bad thing, on its way but not here yet. It's a big bad thing in progress, a very big and very bad thing. So big and so bad that another me is risking fracturing every single reality there is in order to warn me it's coming. So, the real question is...
He looked up and broke off. He was alone in the control room. After a few seconds, a smile began to spread across his face.
The real question is, what exactly it is you expect me to do about it.
He looked up at the time rotor.
What was she telling you, eh? Secrets. You know a lot of those already. Secrets of the past and secrets of the future. Do you already know what's going on? Probably. Well, I'm in your hands on this one. Or I would be if you had hands. You told me you always took me where I needed to go. So this one definitely goes on your to-do list. Okay? Take me where I need to go. When I need to be there.
He smiled.
As if I need to tell you that. You haven't got hands, but if you had legs, you'd be running there just as fast as me, wouldn't you? In case we miss something. Come on, girl. Let's run. We don't want to miss anything, do we? You and me.